Okay, hello everyone. Very good morning to one and all present here and online, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Aneta and I'm working here at the library. It's a true pleasure for me to welcome you to the Researchers' Day 2021. This year's theme, Peace and Conflict, puts important societal changes on the agenda. We have experts from across the field who will be staying with us for the next 10 days, sharing their thoughts, knowledge and opinion with the rest of us. I'm very grateful to you, Sokratis, for taking time off from your busy schedule to attend this event and talk about current topics concerning information and cybersecurity. I wish everyone a successful, nice, safe and fruitful day. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sokratis.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Aneta. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation, and it's a real pleasure being with you and with whoever is watching on stream or possibly the recording. Are we recording, by the way? Okay, good, fine. Okay, so we did a bit of negotiation about the subject before starting the talk today. This is the result of the negotiation. I think it's a good result. I mean, rather than focusing on very technical aspects of information and security, which I could do, I decided to give a broader view of the field, under the assumption that possibly this talk is not only attended by those who know what cybersecurity is about, but also by people that do not know that too well. So the very first thing I would like to go over with you today, of course, is the agenda of what I have prepared. Usually I never make it through the end of any agenda that I do with talks like that, but I will do my best. So at least we will touch upon the items that you see there. So because of the assumption I made about the knowledge of the audience on cybersecurity and so on, the first thing I would like to discuss with you is what it is and how it relates to another concept, which is digital strategic autonomy. This will help to motivate why is it important to do research in cybersecurity after all. Then I will give you some examples of what can go wrong with our increased digital transformation process, and this will lead us into knowledge needs that we need to cover so that we cannot really remove completely everything that can go wrong, but we can at least minimize the likelihood of these happening and the possible impact that such events would have. And then I'll give you, leading from the knowledge needs, what the current research focus areas are, priorities in cybersecurity, so that these knowledge needs can be covered. And actually, well, of course, I don't have a slide on conclusions, but there will be some conclusions. But I will also say a few words about how we treat those, how we address those cybersecurity research areas within the SFI, Norwegian Center for Cybersecurity in Critical Sectors. For those, maybe we have people that are not familiar with what an SFI is. So it is a research-based innovation center. I'll say a few words more about that. Okay, so then we can start. Now, digital strategic autonomy is a concept that has emerged a couple of years ago. Well, of course, it existed before, but it has been formulated as one of the strategic priorities of the current European Union Commission. And because I'm giving first a European view of the subject, this is why I'm focusing on the European Union, which of course strategic options like that affect EFTA countries like Norway, including Norway. So there are several definitions of what this is about, but I think that a good one that will serve our purposes today is that digital strategic autonomy is our ability to source products and services that meet the needs and the values without undue influence from the outside world. And this, of course, applies to the EU as a whole, but it applies to every one member state or any other state, in effect. Obviously, when we mention needs, we mention values, we mention sources. Well, some explanation of what these terms mean. Well, in terms of needs, we talk about hardware, software, or algorithms, and the products or services that are implemented because of these elements. Then the fundamental values, of course, here is a digital ecosystem that is fair, respecting privacy, and digital rights of the citizens. And finally, what does it mean sourcing, sourced within? Well, obviously we cannot produce everything, right? I mean, this is not sustainable model, but we can at least make sure that when we procure these elements, hardware, software, or systems or services from outside of our domain of sovereignty, then we can make sure that this something meets the values and the needs as we have defined them. Okay, good. Okay, what does that have to do with cybersecurity? Well, first of all, what is cybersecurity? Seen from a technical point of view, cybersecurity is about securing things that are vulnerable through ICT. Things can be information, but it can be also things. Your smartwatch, our smart grid, our smart healthcare system, our implantable medical devices, you name it. But this is the technology viewpoint, not the technical viewpoint. In order to link it to the strategic autonomy, you need to think about cybersecurity as the efforts that we do, whatever we do, so that we can secure our cyberspace. Don't ask what cyberspace is. There are lots of definitions around. If you go back to the history of the term, you will see that it was coined quite early, I think several decades ago, by a fiction writer. And he admitted later that it didn't mean anything to him either, but it sounded like a nice word. So now we know, we all feel what cyberspace is, right? So cybersecurity is about protecting our cyberspace. And because of that, and because cyberspace now is considered to be one of the spaces of the national spaces, additional to land, sea, and air, that means that it is important to safeguard it so that we can ensure our digital strategic autonomy and our digital sovereignty. So this is the connection. It doesn't suffice to be cyber secure, to be digitally, strategically autonomous, but it is a necessary ingredient in this process. So, what can go wrong? Well, this is a long list of things that can go wrong. Maybe you've thought about some of them, maybe you have not. But again, all these are related to the increasing digitalization, and this is even more so in Norway, because Norway is among the most digitalized countries in the world. So these are more likely to happen in Norway than in other countries that are not so digitalized. Navigation service, and we do have incidents, by the way, in each one of those categories of things that can go wrong. We do have experience with GPS spamming, for example, and setting a ship somewhere in the middle of inland, which is highly unlikely to happen because of the spamming. Untrusted artificial intelligence. Soon we will be having home robots serving us. There's a huge debate not only about the ethical issues of that, but also about how much trust we can put into such a machine, practically, and how we can interact with that. Our healthcare system. Well, the strategy is, as you probably know, that in Norway, in fact it is a European strategy, we should move as much as possible towards home care so that we decrease the hospitalization periods for patients and correspondingly increase the time that they spend at home, and that will also decrease the cost. Okay? But this means that we have to rely on ICT so that we can have proper monitoring of patients at home. And already there exist incidents because the security of these services was not enough. And this, you understand, may lead to even physical harm to people. Then supply chain is again something that has been in the newspapers a few months ago, namely with the SolarWinds attack and the WannaCry. There are several attacks that have made the newspapers and are related to the security of the supply chain. This is also related to what can happen if you acquire equipment or software by an untrusted supplier. Our communication infrastructure, we're moving towards wireless, we're moving towards 5G. And the controversy with the providers of 5G technology around the world is, I think, well known. And the concerns that exist with certain suppliers of such technology that do not necessarily meet the requirements for a trusted supply chain. Then, again, we are moving fast towards the post-quantum computing era. Google has announced that I think in 7 years they will have ready a commercially available quantum computer. Well, let's wait and see. But that brings with it a huge lot of problems, especially when it comes to cryptography. Because there are concerns, and rightful concerns I would say, that our current cryptographic algorithms will not be strong enough to sustain brute force attacks or more intelligent attacks using a quantum computer. Lack of control over the life cycle or product of a system. Well, again, this relates to the digitalization of everything. We're moving fast towards the digitalization of industry, besides just what I call the traditional ICT. And that means that we will be having things connected to the network. Now, can you imagine how difficult it can be to patch a network of things, like machines in a shop floor? And again, we do have incidents towards that. Interruptions of critical infrastructure. Remember the attacks against the Ukrainian power grid back in 2015, 2016. I'm just mentioning two examples that are, well, relatively well known in Norway, but we have had many more since then around the world. Loss of algorithmic control leading to loss of understanding of decision, Cambridge Analytica case. A good example of what can go wrong. And the world domination of those nice initials, GAFAM and BATX, if you wonder what this is. GAFAM stands for Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. So it's the 5 bad guys that dominate the ICT world today. BATX is the Chinese equivalent. I can't remember the exact names, but I do remember that A stands for Alibaba. So you probably have heard of that as well, right? Platforms for selling things or for doing whatever you can imagine with in the network. And finally, and this is particularly important in Europe, we may face lack or shortage of data. And this is because we have decided in Europe to have quite strong regulation, namely the GDPR, regarding the processing of personal data and the preservation of privacy. Now, this is fine because it is in line with the European values, but on the other hand, it does restrict us from using all the data that we have available. And other nations do have available simply because they are not bound by the GDPR. So a very careful balance needs to be struck here. Okay, but if all these are things that can go wrong, well, all nations have their security strategies. We have our own. Cybersecurity strategy, 5 strategic goals. It sets out the need for digitalization, robust and reliable digital infrastructure, and this is where cybersecurity comes in, actually. The second strategic goal of this cybersecurity strategy. But of course, the other strategic goals are also relevant, and we will come back to them later on. Okay, what are the knowledge needs then? Because these things can go wrong, and because we have a strategy that it would be a good idea to align with and try to achieve the goals. This is not a prioritized list, but it is a list that has come out of a European-wide survey among industry, security professionals, academics, and so on and so forth. So there is some trust that it may be at least partially correct. The list has many more, but these are the top ones. And the top one is safe and secure AI. This is not surprising. AI is something which is not new. It has been around since the 60s. It had failed once in the 70s and the 80s to provide what it was promising. Now it is promising again other things, but of course it's a very different situation, and I do hope that it will provide what it promises. But on the other hand, it has created lots of security and safety concerns about the use. So we do need to understand what this means. Trustworthy software platforms, again, if we are, and we are going to be acquiring software platforms from elsewhere, then we need to make sure that we understand how this can be made trustworthy, what mechanism we have to trust them, and so on. I gave you a lot of threats and possibilities of incidents. So it's obvious that we need to enhance our knowledge of how to manage those cyber threats and also how to respond. This is important because until, let's say, 10 years ago, the assumption was, the doctrine that we were following in cybersecurity was that we could build secure systems and we could keep the bad guys out. Now the assumption has changed. We assume that we will be attacked and we will be successfully attacked. And that means that we need to know how to respond. Similar to the need for trustworthy software platforms comes the need for trustworthy hardware platforms, especially because hardware is not our strong point in Europe. And we do know that it is one way of compromising the supply chain and one way which is difficult to detect that it has happened. Cryptography, I already gave you the scenario on what can happen with the advance of quantum computing. Of course, there is research going on with post-quantum cryptography, but still we do not know, A, whether these algorithms that are being developed for post-quantum computing, crypto algorithms, will be efficient. But even more important, we have no idea, I think, how we will mitigate everything that is now working with algorithms that will probably be compromised in the post-quantum computing era, how we will mitigate to the new regime. And of course, there is the everlasting question of having, yes, lightweight crypto. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Say 2 words about what post-quantum computing is.
Okay, sorry for that. Yes. No, that's you should have asked earlier, but it's okay. Thank you for the question. Well, you know that current computing is based on the binary system, right? 0 and 1, right? Okay. Now this can be represented by a state of one element that either allows current to go through or it doesn't. Okay? Presence of current, no presence of current. Quantum computing uses quantum physics. So it's a completely different way of making computations. I wouldn't go into quantum physics if I were you. I know that, well, quantum physics started, I think, as a research area before the World War II. And at that time, there is an anecdotal evidence that there was a discussion among two scientists working on quantum physics, and one said to the other, to compliment him, that I think you are one of the two persons that understand what quantum physics is. And the response was, it came late. So the first guy says, what are you thinking about? And the response was, well, I'm thinking who the other one could be. So I'm sure that now there are many more that understand what it is. I'm not among them. So I will not attempt to go any further than that. What you can keep is that it is a completely different way of organizing computation, which is extremely fast. That's the point, right? It is multifold, the speed. This is what is of interest, okay? Because our current cryptographic approaches rely on mathematical problems that are hard to solve in finite time. So this is directly related to the computing speed, right? But if you have computers available that can operate at hundreds of times the speed of today's, then obviously this approach doesn't work anymore. Okay. Then another important aspect is user-centric practices and tools. How do we give to the users back the control of their data? Nowadays, all of us, not me, but all of us have data on the cloud. I guess almost everyone does, okay? But you don't really know where they are, where they reside, what is being done with them, and how. So, but yet it's a risk that we take, right? So, shall we give the users back control of their data, and how can we do that without destroying the whole ecosystem that we now have? Digital communication security, again, 5G comes into the picture. We know how to deploy it. We know that there are huge security issues with 5G. Same with software-defined networking. And there is research going on that, but still a very wide field open for security research. And finally, last but not least, is human skills and competencies. Security is the responsibility of everyone. That means that all of us need to contribute to this. And this means that we should have the necessary skills and competencies to do so. Not only cybersecurity professionals, but everyone. And then we need to understand how best we can make people aware of what cybersecurity is, what they need to know, how they need to respond, in addition to, of course, creating the cybersecurity workforce of the future. By the way, we do have, I believe, something like 500,000 shortages of cybersecurity professionals in the coming few years. And we do experience this in Norway as well. So this is a worldwide figure, I think. Okay. Now, this was, as I said, the result of a survey that was done at the European level. It so happens that the European Commission has launched 4 projects that are looking into the competencies and the research that is needed so that we have a secure Europe in the coming years. These are 4 projects then, and it so happens that this one we participate, and by we I mean NTNU, and the research group that I'm leading, Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience Group. So among the results of these projects is this, which is a comprehensive way of presenting the research focus areas. And this is an agreement of all 4 projects, as well as the European Cybersecurity Organization, which is a consortium of industry and academia, several hundreds of members, obviously related to cybersecurity. There are 3 major areas here. One area relates to the governance and capacity building, then trustworthy ecosystem of systems, and under that it's the trust building blocks, and finally disruptive and emerging developments. All these are areas in which we need to prioritize research in cybersecurity. I don't think I have the time to go into detail on that, but I can just highlight collaborative networks, research networks. We are building collaborative research networks. How do we govern them? How do we work together in these? Education and training, I already talked about that. There is an element called certification there, which is important when we want to source from countries outside Europe, right? And there is an element of research how best we do that without, this is not technology related so much, without disturbing the market situation. Because obviously if we are too strict with that kind of certification, then we might find ourselves cut off from the global marketplace. Then secure platforms of platforms. I already gave you those acronyms of the big platforms and how we do that. Infrastructure protection as far as both value chains and critical infrastructure goes. This is not the security of AI, it is security using AI. And we do use AI, artificial intelligence, for security, but yet we do have a long way to go before AI can deliver what it has promised, at least in cybersecurity. Secure architectures, this is where 5G SDN goes in, and system security and security lifetime management, this is actually about secure software development. And then when you come to the disruptive and emerging developments, we talked about secure quantum technologies, about the need for secure AI systems, and there is research needed in what we call personalized privacy protection. How can we come up with systems that will be able to adapt to our own personalized preferences with regards to privacy. Now, the last few minutes, this is what Norkix is. As I said, it is a research-based innovation center, which is a public-private partnership funded in part by the NFR, the Research Council of Norway, and in part by the participating partners. The concept here is what? Bring our research groups in NTNU in close contact, in collaboration with industry and other research institutions. And obviously the focus is on cybersecurity for critical sectors. So you will identify here industry from the energy sector, from the process industry, the chemical industry, the oil and gas industry, the defense industry, healthcare, and the police. Because one thing that we didn't touch upon is the need to have safe cities in the era of digitalization. Okay. And obviously our research partners as well, SINTEF, University of Agder, Norsk Rene Central. And we do have international collaborators as well around the world. The focus areas we have within Norkix are these, and these have been provided by our partners in industry. So this is what industry, or at least the industry as represented within Norkix, but I wouldn't think that it's much different from other views of industry, have more interest in when they talk about cybersecurity. And this is prioritized. So number one is about human and organizational aspects. Industry is concerned how this digital transformation process will affect the human capital and how the human capital and the organizational structure needs to be adapted to the new situation, which of course affects cybersecurity, and cybersecurity affects that. Then 5G. 5G will be dominating in a few years. It will be maybe the only way of communication. That means that all our networks will be based on that. And as I already said, there are huge security questions and concerns about that. Integration of information technology and operational technology. Operational technology is the technology that we use in the factory. And now we've put these together. And finally, data analytics. So what we do in Norkix, we try to bridge the gap between early research that we do in universities and what industry wants, innovation products. This is called the Valley of Death. Very few results that reach this point go up here. So this is what we're trying to do, actually, by bridging those two worlds together. And how we do it? Well, we do it by having a research-based innovation process. We follow that. So we ask our industry partners to identify problems, and then we jointly identify them. We, in academia and research, We do the state of the art, we come up with candidate solutions, and these then are fed back to industry for both initial validation, training. Industry will do the realistic validation. This is a cycle in here. And finally, if all things go well, then there will be a solution release. Okay, so time to conclude, I think. Well, what is it to conclude? Depends on my target audience. Let's see. I would address researchers that might be considering engaging, or persons that might be considering engaging in cybersecurity research. Of course, this is a biased opinion, but I think this is exciting. I mean, the vision, and particularly the vision in Norkics, to contribute to making the country the most securely digitalized country in the world, at least for me, it's exciting. And I do hope that it is exciting for others as well. Well, I just gave a very, very broad overview of what you can do in cybersecurity research. I'm sure that you will be able to find a topic that will excite you in addition to the excitement of the overall goal. So, if there are any questions, of course, I'll be happy to take now. And if anyone wants to learn more about opportunities on doing research in cybersecurity, again, I'll be happy to talk to them. So, thank you very much. Yes? Okay. I recruited one already.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Very nice.
I'm just curious about, we have this other center, CCIS.
Yes.
Is there any connection?
Of course there is. Of course there is. Well, if you look at this, right? This is exactly the same concept than CCIS. It's exactly the same concept. Where is the difference? Well, one difference, of course, is that Norkics is focusing on cybersecurity in critical sectors. CCIS is about information and cybersecurity in general. Okay? And this is the biggest difference. In fact, the relationship is there because one of the strategic goals of CCIS, when it was first established, in the first strategic plan, was to establish an SFI or okay, or an SFF. So this was done in order to satisfy that strategic goal of CCIS, and therefore, obviously, the synergies are there. It's the same research groups, it's the same people. The constituents, our industry partners are not exactly the same, but there are partners that are both partners in Norkics and partners in CCIS. And of course, the funding model is a little bit different because the funding here comes, it's 48%, I think, from the NFR, and the rest comes from the partners. So it's more, let's say, industry driven. Yeah, that's it. Yes? Maybe I should repeat the question. I'm not sure whether the mic will, yeah, okay. Please ask it and then I will repeat. So in retrospect, the question before was what's the relationship between CCIS, which is the Center for Cyber and Information Security, also hosted by the Department of Information Security and Communication Technology at NTNU, my department, and Norkics, right? So. Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. So the question, sorry, sorry. The question was, in order to address the shortage of data, whether we could use simulation to produce, I would say, artificial data sets, right? Synthetic, what we call synthetic data sets. And the example you gave was like, for example, weather data. The answer is yes, and we do that. But there is a problem with synthetic data. It's quite difficult to, of course, it depends on the domain and what kind of data set this is. But when it comes to security data, security-related data, synthetic data sets have a tendency to deviate from the properties of real data. And I can give you a very easy example of why this is happening. Suppose that we want to create a data set of a network under attack. Okay. How often is a network really attacked? You won't have many attacks. And in fact, if this network is an industrial network, an industrial Internet of Things network, you will have really very scarce attacks against it. Now, when you create a synthetic data set, you can, of course, regulate the number of attacks that you can have, right? But usually, the statistical properties of synthetic data sets deviate from the statistical properties of the real data sets. So we can use it, yes, and we do. But this is not always the answer. Okay? And in fact, it is a research area. How can we create data sets that will, for example, be used for training our machine learning algorithms, but they will be reliable data sets? Right now, we are, and by we I mean NTNU, the Faculty of Information Technology and Electrical Engineering, is preparing a proposal for the Horizon program to build a network of excellence on secure and safe artificial intelligence. We're going to submit it, I believe, sometime in November or October. I'm a little bit messy with the deadlines of these European programs, but there is a deadline on October and another one in November. Anyway, one of the items that we're looking at there is exactly this. How can we have trusted data sets for training and testing our machine learning algorithms and AI-based systems? Yes?
And then we have this cyber range.
Yes?
I guess that's where you use the data maybe.
Well, okay.
We'll do that in Nordics too.
Yes. Okay. The question was that we have another nice thing in in NTNU EECO. This is the Department of Information Security and Communication Technology. And this nice thing is called the Norwegian cyber range. Now, cyber ranges are playgrounds. We use them for training, but we also use them for testing what-if scenarios with cybersecurity. So the Norwegian Cyber Range is a project that was developed here in NTNU with partners, of course, and it was funded by the Fylkeskommune, so by the local government. It is still under development, but all cyber ranges are perpetually under development. I mean, these are live projects. What's the connection to NORCIX? Well, the connection to NORCIX is this. NORCIX is working on extending the functionality of the Norwegian cyber range from purely IT systems to systems that have an IT and an OT component, what we call cyber physical systems. So right now, with the existing cyber range, we can test what-if scenarios in, let's say, a banking system, right? Or anything that is only ICT based. So what we're trying to do is to extend this with making it feasible to test with the Norwegian cyber range the smart grid, for example, right? Well, not the live smart grid. This is not a good idea. I mean, no one would like to make experiments, to run experiments on a live critical system. But you probably know that we do have the Smart Grid National Lab in Trondheim. And my group is working with them towards bringing the two together. This is one of the activities that we have in NORCIX, but in other projects funded by the European Union as well. So finally, what we will be having out of this is the second generation of cyber ranges. There are not many around the world that have this capability of cyber ranging, cyber physical systems rather than just cyber systems.
Are there more questions? Okay,
No.
thank you again for this excellent presentation.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you
Anna.
for giving your time. This is a small gift from us.
Wow, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
You're welcome. Thank you once again.
And all my best wishes for success of the whole week. Thank you so much again.